There was a legitimate excitement about the potential of tech-driven journalism. And for a moment, I think, the civic design of the internet and the civic purpose of journalism seemed to be aligned. But then something changed. The principles of the open web that held such promise for citizens and journalists gave way to an ecosystem dominated by a small number of companies who now hold tremendous power and influence over what we see and what we know.
When you talk about these international giants, there's just so few. You can name them on one hand, Facebook, Google, and so on. Very few monopolies with a lot of power. Could this ever be broken? Could a new technological platform come in that it could be as big as Google or Apple?
I think the fear amongst regulators and increasingly governments is that the nature of the system does not allow for competition at the moment. That we do have a number of monopolies coexisting. Facebook, Apple, Google, and Amazon all having different types of monopolies or different commercial spaces. And so I do think one of the tools that is going to be attempted to push back against the power of these companies is going to be antitrust regulation. And it will probably originate in the EU, where there is already a push to break up the activities of some of these companies inside the EU. And the language of monopoly and the language of anti-competition is really sort of driving the discourse around these companies in Europe in a way it hasn't yet in North America. But it could. And you're already starting to see rumblings of this in the US Congress, in the activist community around antitrust and monopolies. So it's not impossible that this becomes a real lever that's used to seek to break up or to at least to reduce the power of some of these companies.
In terms of the States, what's really scary, and it's scary in part because I don't understand it completely, but I'm trying to understand this whole controversy about net neutrality. And almost because it sounds complex, I wonder if it's going to grab the imagination of the average sort of American. But they're trying to break against what Obama did to ensure that the net was neutral and that companies are going to be able to determine more and more what you can access. Tell me about what your thoughts of what's happening right now in the States about net neutrality.
So I think that it will fundamentally change the structure of the internet. The internet was by design an open space, and a core attribute of it was that information flowed through the system in a way that was unimpeded by those that controlled the system. And that will change. The companies that give us access to the internet will be able to decide what content we see and what content we don't see, or the pace with which we see it. Right? So that is a significant change to the character of the internet. However, the internet is already filtered to us in many other ways. And one of the biggest ways it's filtered to us is via platforms. So Facebook has interestingly been allowed to sit outside of the net neutrality debate, while at the same time it filters the content its users see. So I think we will probably end up in a place where we will have two filters on the internet. We will have filtering by the cable providers or the internet providers who will make deals with different types of content to provide it to us at different speeds and for different prices. And then we'll have another layer of filtering, which are the algorithmic systems that the platforms are using to filter the content that comes through their system. And this is a very far cry from the decentralized internet that was imagined 30 years ago. This ecosystem is supported by the relentless collection and sale of data about its participants. And our attention has turned into a commodity, a model of surveillance capitalism that has an unending thirst for content. It is a system which measures value as engagement and where virality is what is incentivized. One that is determined by technologies that are both hidden from view and which were designed around incentives that are in private rather than public interests.
Give me a scenario.
So, Silicon Valley is extending into the education space. They want to make our schools more efficient. They want to monitor children in schools to help them learn. They think they can teach and run an education system better than the industrial infrastructure which we've built. Right? And that, in many ways, may be the case. But what it could very easily lead to is more and more of our education system being moved to the digital space, more and more use of digital agents and avatars to teach our children that are optimized to teach them individually rather than collectives. That's just one example, but I think we're heading down a path where more and more of the functions of our society are being implemented by a very small number of companies using vast data stores about our lives. And that will lead to some incredible efficiencies in the healthcare system, in the financial system, in the education system. But we're also losing control of it in a way that I think we need to be careful about. In the digital spaces determined by Facebook and Google, journalism must compete in what is ultimately a market for our attention. Journalism has no privilege in this model, alongside all of the information fighting to reach us. It is but one voice, one content type, competing with gossip, propaganda, advertising, and all of the information shared by our friends and family. And is doing so within a system where the financial incentives are set by and are to the benefit of the platforms themselves. One notable shift of this consequence that I saw and lived through is that scholars and practitioners of digital journalism, once champions of the internet, began to question the character of the media ecosystem itself. I'd come to the Tao Center with the hope of learning on the front lines of an industry being remade, but my growing fear was that the internet was profoundly ill-suited not just for the future of journalism, but also for the integrity of our democracy.